All right, before I dive in, I'd like to give you some tips about speaking. Why? Because there's going to be many of you who will speak at the Great Recruiter Seminar next year. And you're going to have such success in your summer selling and your year of recruiting that Dan Moore is going to ask you to teach a part next January. How you address the stage and your audience before you begin talking is going to make a huge difference. Did you all know that in the first few seconds, your audience is going to determine if you're approachable and if you've got something deep and fresh to say? Or if maybe you just blew it up in the summertime and you're going to regurgitate some of the stuff that you gave on your Sunday advanced sales calls? Are you just going to wing it? Or are you going to put something together that's truly going to be great? By the way that you address the audience in the first 10 seconds, they're going to be able to tell whether you're just excited to be up on stage presenting to your peers, or if you've really got something to say that you've earned the right and you're ready to give them a great message. I know this is a complete side note of what I'm going to be talking about with character, but maybe as you're watching speakers, consider not only what they say, but how they say it. Consider how it makes you feel. Hello to my Southwestern friends. How many of you ever heard someone say before, I could never do that. I could never do that. I've heard that a lot of times. I sold books for 7 summers, for crying out loud. I bet you'd probably agree with me that for college students that are going to sell books, selling books is probably the most challenging thing that they'll ever do. But you'll probably also agree with me that people that have already sold books, to them, there's probably going to be more challenging things that they do in the course of their lifetime. The beauty of selling books and recruiting is that it creates such a wonderful environment for developing both skills and character attributes. But how many skills and what type of character attributes do you earn? Have you ever listed them before? For the last 4 years, I've been immersing myself in how people develop character, and I learned the formula by putting yourself into an environment that causes challenge, stress, and uncertainty. You're developing character. The environment that we call the book field is a perfect incubator for character development. But as I've been studying this, I learned that all those years I was selling books, I was leaving room for personal growth on the table. So in this video, I'm going to share with you some of the secrets that I knew if I knew them back then, I would have grown faster and more efficiently. I would have become a person of high character in a better way. I would have maximized my potential years for selling books. How many of you, if you learn that you're missing out on opportunities for character growth simply because you weren't aware of how to maximize your character attributes, how many of you would want to know what you're missing? Well, I had a problem with character when I was selling books. My problem wasn't that I was lacking character in such a way that I felt shameful or unable to grow personally. My biggest problem was one that I think that everybody shares. It's that I didn't know how to measure how I was learning and growing in character, other than whether I was hitting my goals or not. I guess I intuitively knew that I was strengthening my character by selling books, but I could never quantify my progress. So I'm the CEO of Create Clubs, an entrepreneurship and character development education program for high school students. We created what we call the Create 88. It's 88 character competencies that a student can measure themselves against. So while I grew during my years of selling books, I know now that I left a ton of room to grow on the table because I wasn't aware of the areas that I needed to grow. And here's a big takeaway from this is you can't improve what you don't measure. In 2015, I embarked on a challenge that was 10 times harder than selling books. Some of these experiences that I had, I wish everybody in the world could have them, but other experiences I would never wish upon my worst enemy. I had great successes and I had massive failures. So I've spent the last 4 years researching character attributes, and I've been categorizing them so that I could identify them, and more importantly, so that I can articulate these character attributes for others. The truth is that most of us are uneducated about our character development. I would argue that character development is the most important form of education. I'm not going to unpack all of the 88 character competencies that we logged with Create Clubs in the course of this video, but I have picked out 9 of the most important character elements for becoming a great recruiter. Before we dive in, we need to start with a couple of distinctions and a few definitions about character attributes. Character is different than skills. And you can see that if I were to list character and skills, how they might differentiate the two. A man named Rich DeVinny was a former Navy SEAL and a special ops team leader. He wrote a book on developing character called The Attributes. And he said that character attributes are wired into our internal circuitry, always running in the background, dictating how we behave and react and perform. And if you develop character attributes, you'll have more capacity for developing skills. Maybe one way to think about this is to imagine the difference between an app and the operating system in my iPad right here, or on a phone, or on a computer. Because it's the operating system that really runs all the apps, and character development, character attributes are kind of like the operating system, whereas the apps are much more like the skills. You know, if I were to run some old apps like Angry Birds, I could probably do that on an old iPad. However, if you're going to use an app that does video editing, you might require a higher operating system. And that's a great way to think about your character attributes versus skills. See, because you can develop more and more skills if you develop the character attributes that support those skills. Another way to think about this is to imagine your best potential rookie. You know, if you've got a rookie that makes a great first impression or has charisma, a lot of confidence, maybe they can speak well, they can formulate great ideas. They're the ones that always seem great. But when it comes down to it on the book field, they've got low resilience. Maybe they have a fear of rejection. They don't have stick-to-itiveness. They don't have drive. What's going to happen in the first couple of weeks with this particular rookie? The odds are is they're going to quit because while they might have some great skills, they don't have the character development to help them do what's necessary to excel in the book field. The idea is that if you develop character attributes, you'll become a more rounded person. You'll be more interesting. You'll also be able. See, if you develop your character attributes, you'll level up to new challenges and new experiences. Without developing character attributes, you'll be leaving life experiences on the table. There will be things you won't be able to do because either you're not chosen for them or you won't have the gumption, the courage, and the ability to take on a new challenge. So character attributes are forged in environments that contain 3 elements: challenge, stress, and uncertainty. Doesn't that just scream the book field? Challenge, stress, and uncertainty. Here's the caveat. If you want to get the most out of this environment, this challenge, stress, and uncertain environment, you need to have intense focus, but you also have to have time afterwards for plenty of rest and recovery. Because it's in the rest and recovery that you really develop new possibilities with your character attributes. When we accept our situation and take responsibility for our victories and our defeats, that's also when we grow. However, if we have a victim mindset, we're certain to lose all the opportunities that we might have in the potential environment for character growth. So this sounds simple, right? But it's certainly not easy. Notice that I said that we have to take responsibility for our victories and our defeats. Joan Didion gave this wonderful quote on character and self-respect, saying that character, the willingness to accept responsibility for one's own life, is the source for which self-respect springs. So let me see if I can illustrate this. I'll tell you with a personal story, because I mentioned earlier that selling books may not be the most challenging thing that you'll ever choose to do in your life. All right, so I've got a great story about crashing and burning. I think you'll like it. In 2014, between June and September, my wife and I raised just shy of $1 million to start Young Life in the Balkan regions. Young Life is this Christian youth organization. And we were so thrilled that we'd be able to launch something that didn't exist in a set of countries in Southeastern Europe. So I told all my friends and my supporters that I was going to move to Bulgaria and live there for 3 years with my wife and kids. We sold all of our earthly possessions, everything that didn't fit into 12 duffel bags and totes, and we took our kids out of their great public schools in Minnesota. Why would we do this? We thought that we could learn a new culture. We'd learn a new language. Hopefully we'd impact a couple of nations, maybe even a few generations from now. I had this dream of becoming a significant difference in the world. Even if no one knew me, I wanted to have a positive mark on the next generation in a grand scale. We wanted to experience the world, and we wanted the world to change us, and we did. Mostly I became great friends with Emil and Vasil and Laura and dozens of other Bulgarian booksellers. As far as my career goes with Young Life, I had tons of new responsibilities and I had excellent skills to meet them. I knew how to recruit, I knew how to lead, and within 2 years we had 12 staff, and our numbers with our leaders and volunteer leaders were doubling and doubling again. To this day, there's still 8 staff there. There's over 50 volunteers, and they reach over 500 kids a year in these 2 countries, Bulgaria and Albania. I developed a lasting infrastructure for a program where adults are coming along young people. They listen to their cares. They believe in their dreams. And they tell them that if there's a God in this universe, this God loves them and is for them. I believe that that ripple effect will change the culture of these countries and beyond someday. We were doing this. We were making an impact. However, we struggled with the language. I struggled with the language. Man, it was hard for me to learn it. Struggle with the language came struggling with the culture and assimilating into the culture. My years with Southwestern gave me the skills to excel. But I was in for new character lessons in this environment of challenge, stress, and uncertainty that was far beyond my book-filled years. I remember one time after I'd been there for a few years, I walked into a convenience store to buy a water and a job bar. And if you've never had a job bar, you need to get you one someday. My language was good enough to buy a candy bar, but I was kind of speaking in elementary school words, and I bet I was probably making some grammatical mistakes. There was an old man that was standing next to me in line, and he looked at me with such disdain. And after I was trying to order, he spat out with real vehement words, "Tourist." It cut me deep. It was a wound that I felt for the rest of that day. I'd replay it, and it was like Mrs. Jones slamming the door on you. The problem was I've heard comments like these about my language or poor language in their country, and I should learn the language in their country. But I'd heard maybe 107,300 comments like these from the neighbors, from the police, from my landlord or my employees. And it was reminding me that I was living in a country where as much as I tried, I hadn't assimilated. I wasn't good enough. 3 years of this slow progress felt like selling 100 units a week for 150 straight weeks in a row. By the end of my 3 years, which is what we had committed to in the beginning, I felt like I'd overextended my stay. In the end, I lost my edge. I hired a guy who I thought was going to solve all of my problems, and he was going to run the ministry in the biggest city in Bulgaria, in Sofia. Everything on paper looked great with this guy. He had a good pedigree. He was at the right school. But I learned later that his character traits that he had weren't in alignment with Young Life, and they weren't in alignment with me. Ultimately, I had to fire this guy. He got mad. He sued Young Life. He lied about our organization to the Prime Minister, and he said that I was even stealing money from Bulgarians. All of this was baseless. Now, if you've never been sued before, it's really good for developing character. I highly recommend it. But I thought to myself, how did all of this come to be? And upon reflection, like Joan Didion, I looked myself in the mirror and said, man, I had made some pretty big mistakes hiring and firing this guy, and it almost took my organization down. Because I hadn't yet learned the language or the culture, I couldn't perform with the responsibility that my job, my role required. What a great experience. What a great experience to be totally hollowed out. By the end of 2018, man, I was burnt. We left the country in defeat. Once again, we had to sell everything that we owned, except this time, it wasn't on our terms. We had to sell it like a fire sale. We literally snuck out in the middle of the night to catch a 5:50 in the morning flight. We had one final surprise at the airport as we were leaving the country. Three guys really snuck up behind us in an airport terminal, and it turned out to be Emil Svetkov and Emil Jr. and Denislav, and we were so thrilled as those guys saw us off. But it was so bittersweet as they hugged us in the airport on our way out. After 3 years in Bulgaria, I was exhausted and defeated. Defeat. I returned to the United States without a career. I was lacking faith, and I was living with my wife and my 2 kids in a 1-bedroom condo. I lost the conviction that the lights were always going to turn green for me. Finally, one morning, I looked out of my window in my mom's condo, and I noticed that it was a clear day. I noticed the birds. I looked over and I noticed I had a beautiful, wonderful wife lying next to me. In the other room, I could hear my kids stirring, and they were healthy and happy. What I could see, what I could hear in that present moment, man, I was grateful. I looked at my clock. It was 9:09 a.m. So I started to set alarms. That at 9:09 and at 12:12 and 3:03 and 6:06, every 3 hours approximately, I would get present to my situation and be grateful. And all of a sudden, it started to pull me into a new direction. Character is born from both success and defeat. It's the willingness to accept responsibility for one's own life as the source from which self-respect springs. Character springs from immersing yourself into these 3 environments: stress, challenge, and uncertainty. And character attributes are wired into our internal circuitry, always running in the background, dictating how we behave and react and perform. Fast forward 2 years. My experience overseas made me even more able. My current challenge as a CEO requires skills that are way level up from the work that I did in Bulgaria. But regarding character development, it's elementary compared to my time overseas. Dealing with the life challenges that COVID brought here is easy for me and my family because we leveled up in our past experiences and our character attributes. We're going to start to dive into the first 3 of the 9 critical elements of becoming a world-class recruiter. And the first character trait that I'd like to talk with you about is being teachable. So let me tell you a different story. In October of 2018, I went to Hollywood for a week. West Hollywood to be exact. So the person putting on this writing workshop that I went to, his name's Rob, and I've been following him for years on podcasts. And he's really spoken great nuggets of wisdom into my life. This dude has done it. He's earned it. He's made it happen. He's a famous speaker. He's written 11 books. Some of them are on the bestsellers list. He's one of my personal heroes. He's nearly done a Netflix series that almost got greenlighted. He's written a play, and he has over 1 million people that follow his podcasts. He really is an icon. So I decided I'm going to go and check him out at a writing conference, something called Something to Say. So I plopped down $750 to go and see him. Went all the way to Hollywood. And it was in this intimate group of about 25 people. I was so excited. I'd get to spend 3 or 4 days with this dude learning about how to write. So I sat in the very front row as he was teaching, and I'd take these furious notes. And then he'd take a breath, and I'd rest my hand. And then he'd start talking again, and I'd take these furious notes. After 3 days of this, at one of the lunch breaks, he pulled me aside, and I'm like, yes, Maybe I'm going to be friends with Rob. This is going to be fantastic. Pulled me aside and he said, Tony, I've watched you and you've written down every single thing that I say. I think that tells me something about you. I thought to myself, well, that's an interesting comment to start a friendship. At that point, I decided I was going to give him a quick retort and I'd say, well, hey, maybe I'm just that teachable. He said, no, Tony, it's really not teachable. It's just that you're eager. Because if you want to be teachable, I think you ought to write 4 books. The first 3 will probably be bad, but the 4th one will be good enough to publish. Then you'll be teachable. Man, he was right. It's through my experiences that I've learned things. Being teachable relates to actions and skills, not understanding ideas. So I'm going to embed a video here so that you can take a look at this of a guy named Destin Sandlin, and I think he really helps to understand this point. It's really through developing new neural pathways, because our brains have neuroplasticity. By practicing an event over and over and over, we can learn something. And this video talks about how he created a bicycle, or frankly, his welders did. He's an engineer. And if you turn the handlebars to the right, the wheel turns to the left. And it taught him something completely new about how we learn. Take a look at this video from Destin Sandlin. A few things that you can take away from this. Developing a skill takes time and practice, but it does one day eventually click. Once you level up, it's difficult to relate to people in old ways. That's why Southwestern friends are such great friends, because it's hard to relate to people that haven't gone through the same process. These people that don't have these neural pathways that you have seem to not get it, but the people that do, oh, are they tight. So a question for you is, how does this reframe frustration? Frustration is the feeling that you have right before a breakthrough. And finally, being teachable is doing actions repeatedly that helps us create new neural pathways. So you can think of some of the skills that you may need to develop to be a great recruiter. I'm going to share with you 2 of them that I think are very important. 2 skills for being a fantastic recruiter. One is you have to have great selling skills. Rookies must trust in 3 things. First, a rookie must trust in you. They have to believe in your product. And by the way, the product is not the books that you're selling to a rookie. The product is Southwestern Advantage. And 3, a rookie needs to believe in themselves. Maybe you could think of somebody that is great at selling themselves well because they're a person of integrity and they've got high character. Maybe you can think of a sales manager that is easy to trust because they're a trustworthy person. And when they're talking about Southwestern, they're talking about ideals that are appealing to you and everyone. And then finally, it takes time to sell someone on themselves. But it's extremely important to believe in other people so that they can believe in themselves too. Second skill that you need to have as a great recruiter: you need to be an other-oriented future predictor. So let me frame this up, an other-oriented future predictor. Because the truth is that nobody can predict the future. However, Southwestern's been around for 150 years. And it seems as though the summer happens again and again and again and again and again. There's some of the same instances that are going to happen. Kids are going to get rejected. The cops are going to get called on you. That stuff happens all the time. So you can predict the future for your rookies because you know what's going to happen. One time I visited a Roma village in Tirana, Albania. I was part of a service team for international students from Switzerland, England, and Germany. And their parents were business owners and they're heads of states, and they paid about $2,000 just so that their kids could go and build a playground. These high school kids could build a playground in this poor area of Albania. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Tirana is a city of about 1.2 million people, and the mayor who I met had just built a highway through kind of a slum. Now, to his credit, he also built government housing for everybody that was displaced. We went there to build a playground in this government housing project. There was an Albanian there that told us how we should respond to the people that were living there. He knew what he was doing. He knew his job well. He's done this before. And we were going to build this nice, shiny, yellow slide. He told us that it was really important that you poured the concrete deep, and you have to let it set before you put in the studs to build the slide. Then he said, don't add the slide before the concrete is fully set. Because once the slide is up, kids are going to want to use it. And they won't stop wanting to use it until it's broken. You got to make it as sturdy as possible. So for 2 days, we left the studs in the ground. They actually asked us that we would guard the studs at night and keep watch to make sure that and be as sturdy as possible. Now, when the slide was actually put up, these Roma kids, they called them gypsies, maybe 60 of them, were pushing each other in line to have a chance to slide down this 8-foot slide. It was as if Christmas just came. They slid 2 to 5 kids at a time down the slide and then raced around the end to get in line, and it was just a complete mess. Hour after hour after hour. My Albanian friend, he knew these kids' nature, and he knew that they couldn't wait for the concrete to set. He set us up so that we could do our job well and it could be successful for these kids on the slide. When you're training a rookie, you've got to let the concrete set. You've got to let them understand some of the basic principles about selling books way before they ever go out and enjoy the slide. One tip I want to give you is this: what they tell you is far more important than what you tell them. When they can repeat back to you the mindset that's necessary to successfully sell books, this is like the concrete setting for the kids on the slide. See, if the concrete isn't set, the slide's going to break. And if your rookie can't repeat back to you the important components of the summer, hours, demos, and attitude, it's not how you start, but it's how you finish. If they can't frame that up, the concrete hasn't set for their summer to go. So how do you ensure that the concrete is set deep enough? Well, you go through the emotional curve of a meeting, and I'm going to explain it very briefly. You see, when a student comes in the first couple of meetings, you're going to always build their confidence in the very beginning. And then you're going to share with them a story that might bring their emotions down just a little bit. And then you'll tell them why it's worth it and show them the profit. This is the typical curve that you'll go through with every meeting with students. But as you train more and more and longer with them, your curve is going to go deeper into the emotional aspects. I remember on the day that I would teach my rookies about commitment, I would talk to them about the times that I would knock on doors and I got blown away at maybe 9 o'clock in the morning. And I would say the words of whatever this mom said that was very rude to me. And I'd show them door by door by door how I'd stop and wait maybe 10 to 15 seconds in the first couple of doors. But as nobody was home, it became a minute or 2 minutes in between the doors. And how my thinking went from I can do this to man, she was rude. And from man, she was rude to man, this sucks. And from man, this sucks to what am I doing out here? And as the hour went by and another hour went by, I started to calculate my hourly wage. Hopefully you can hear in my voice and you can see in my tone how I'm taking a rookie's emotions down with me. And we're deeply going and building some concrete of what they're going to experience this summer. And then I'm going to bring them back up. I'm going to tell them how I got through the rest of that day. And then I'm going to tell them why I got through every day. And I'm going to tell them what a difference it made for my life. I don't need to tell you my story. You need to have your own story on why it's worth it, what you gained, and the value that that will be for this rookie. Then I'd show them the money in 12, 15 different ways before they went to go sell books. So it was so ingrained in them. They may not even need sales school because they're tough as nails. I want to tell you the reason why I've put this video together. And I wanted to tell you the reason why I put all this stuff for Southwestern together for you guys. Truly, this is a way for me to pay it forward. I got a lot out of my years of selling books. I'm very grateful for those years. And so I want to pay it forward to as many managers and rookies to help make this awesome thing of Southwestern Advantage continue to do the best it possibly can. But I also want to give you an opportunity to pay it forward. If you'd like some more information on how I train rookies, not only just this emotional curve stuff, showing you some canvassing charts, giving you a look at some training games that I used, and also the rest of the character attributes that I'm not going to put into this video, I want to share an offer with you. If you make any donation to Create Clubs, that's going to go 100% to students' enrollment fees to help them pay to join a Create Club. I'll give you access to all of the rest of the information that we put to training together for Southwestern Advantage. Because there's going to be hundreds of kids in Create Clubs that are wanting to start their own business, that are going to want to be part of a high school entrepreneurship club. Who knows, they might be future booksellers someday. But they can't afford the $380 that it costs to join a Create Club and develop character principles. I want to give you an opportunity to make a donation, an opportunity to pay it forward. Having said that, if you're in a spot in between summers and you don't have any opportunity to be able to donate, I'm going to ask that you just send me a quick email to tony@createclubs.org. Let me know your situation, and I'll be glad to give you free access to all of the rest of it. This is only for people involved in Southwestern Advantage. Shoot me that email, make a donation today, not only so that you can develop your own character, but so that you can become a world-class recruiter and leader.